You're listening to Emmy Award-winning host Jordan J. Adams.
Julia Ross holds an MA in clinical psychology as well as a California marriage and family therapy license. She's the director of the Nutritional Therapy Institute in Mill Valley, California, and as far back as 1980, as director of her first program, Ross began hiring nutritionists to research the link between biochemistry, emotion, and addiction, with a special focus on treating people with carbohydrate addictions, blood sugar problems, and dieting disorders. Does that sound familiar? That's like the latest cutting edge stuff, and look how long Julia's been doing this. Julia, you are a true pioneer. It is time for us to make our fighting weight and welcome Julia Ross.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
Well, I mean, I have to tell you, Julia, I'm a real fan of your work. The first time I heard you speak, my ears just like kind of turned forward towards the speakers. They were like a dog turns its ears, because you were really the first person, for me at least, to put two and two together in a way that I had never seen or heard before. I really like your work with brain chemistry. How did you get into this field?
Well, as you just explained, I was trained to do psychotherapy and to see all problems from a psychotherapeutic perspective, but it turned out that all problems didn't respond to a psychotherapeutic perspective, and in particular, the problems that I had just become director of a program to solve did not respond, and those problems were addictions and eating disorders. So we know now that addictions and eating disorders have primarily a brain chemistry origin, and trying to talk people out of a brain chemistry imbalance is impossible. And that's why relapse is so common among people with these disorders. So I was fortunate enough in the middle 80s to run across some research by a neurochemist, a brain specialist, who was applying what he knew about brain chemistry and addiction in a new way. He was using the nutrients that as a brain chemist he knew the brain needed to make all of its anti-craving, pro-mood chemicals, the neurotransmitters. He knew that specific nutrients were required for the brain to make a perfect set of moods and to protect us from cravings for substances, whether they be sugar or heroin. And he began to do some research, and the research was absolutely thrilling. And so those of us who were in the field perked up our ears, this is in 1985, and began to hire nutritionists. I already had a nutritionist on staff, but she wasn't doing anything because no one could stop overeating. No one could stop relapsing on crack cocaine just by changing their diet. And of course, most of them couldn't even change their diet. So I knew there was something to nutrition, but I hadn't found what it is until this man's research showed it to me. And then we started to apply it using individual amino acids, the specific nutrients the brain needs to light itself up. And we saw that within a week, we had crack cocaine addicts who'd never been able to get even 24 hours clean, were clean for a week. And this was so remarkable that we began to use it with everyone, including a group of people who had never been researched before, and those were the overeaters. And we found that the overeaters, because their lifestyle was more stable, was easier for them to apply this nutritional technology, and their cravings completely disappeared. These are binge eaters and bulimics, completely disappeared in a week. So why would I ignore this? You know, we could always give them psychotherapy too, and many of them needed it. But without the brain chemistry correction, they couldn't make use of the psychotherapy because the moods and the cravings were screaming at them at all times.
This is why my ears kind of perked forward, because this to me feels like like you've really found it. I feel like a lot of other groups are kind of dancing around this, but they still haven't quite found, put the pieces together. Like and the real powerful element in this for me is that I don't have to feel guilty anymore, and my
Yes.
don't have to feel guilty anymore, because I have had that 10-year battle of I can go clean for about 2-3 days, and by day 4 it is all over, and it is ugly. I mean, day 4 is ugly. Get out of the kitchen, because I will throw you out of the kitchen if you're in between me and the refrigerator. And and then of course after that 24-hour binge, then the guilt and the I can't stick to anything, and all of the sign
What's wrong with me?
yeah, the self-berating, and now to know that there was a chemical issue going on that's almost impossible, and like you're saying, pretty much impossible to surmount. So, wow,
It
this is
doesn't.
really good news.
Well, look at Oprah Winfrey. She identifies herself as a food addict. This is a woman, with all the resources possible going for her, and she has not been able to put it down. This piece of information is key not only to eliminating the problem, but as you say, restoring your self-respect and the respect of the people around you. Because all kinds of people around addicts are saying, why don't you just stop eating that?
Yeah. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, and they're wondering too what's wrong with you, and now they know there really isn't anything wrong with you. Your intentions are wonderful. It's your brain chemistry that's flawed, and you're one of in the majority of Americans who are struggling terribly with this. They're either on antidepressants or on sugar, or both, typically both, of course. And we have some terrible health epidemics, right behind these addictions. It's one of the reasons that I'm so pleased to be here and pleased to have my book sell so well, because we've got to get this information out there. These nutrients are available in any health food store and online. They're inexpensive. They're only needed temporarily. Why? Because once you correct the brain chemistry, you can keep it in balance by eating an adequate protein diet with a lot of healthful side dishes, vegetables, fruits, other healthy carbohydrates, and fats along with your protein. But the protein is the main agenda for lifetime freedom from cravings and mood problems, because the nutrients that the brain needs to make its miraculous neurotransmitters, those neurotransmitters can only be made out of certain proteins. And of the 22 proteins available in foods, typically the high protein foods like poultry and meat and fish, eggs, those foods can sustain a balanced brain, but they often cannot rebalance a very depleted brain. So sometimes people say, well, why don't you just have people eat more protein? That's the first step. If you can eat more protein and your cravings go away, fine. But a lot of people eat more protein. For example, Atkins dieters always say, oh yeah, I tripled my protein. I feel so much more energetic and clear-headed and strong, and this is really good. And then we ask them, well, then why do you think you relapse at the same rate as anybody who goes on any other diet? And they say, well, it wasn't good enough. I felt better, but I didn't lose those cravings for the sugar. And I was always fighting them, not as strongly as when I wasn't eating a lot of protein, but still it was always there. I was going to slip eventually. And in fact, most Atkins dieters and other dieters never intend their diet to be permanent because they know it's completely impossible. It's just hold on tight, try to get some weight off before you go back to it.
Yeah, it's white knuckling. Yeah. We're talking with Julia Ross. She is the director of the Nutritional Therapy Institute in Mill Valley, California, way ahead of the curve when it comes to this science. Has been talking about this since the 80s. Here's some of the symptoms that Julia is addressing. When it comes to depleted brain chemistry, sensitivity to emotional or physical pain, crying easily, eating as a reward for pleasure, comfort, or numbness, worry, anxiety, phobia, or panic, sensitivity to emotional pain, difficulty getting to sleep or staying asleep, difficulty with focus, attention deficits. The list goes on and on and on. Low energy, low drive, lower arousal, obsessive thinking or behavior.
You don't have to have all of these symptoms, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah, don't wait, please. Don't wait until you have all these symptoms before you start studying this stuff. I had a bunch of this stuff. Fortunately, not the whole list. My my razor's edge, if you will, is I want to increase my lean body mass to fat ratio, so I'm always looking for biohacks, and I'm always looking for the ways to keep my metabolism revved up and to keep burning fat and to keep increasing my lean body mass, because that is anti-aging. So I'm always looking for the biohacks, and I'm always looking for the golden nuggets that help me on day 3, 4, and 5, because those traditionally for me are the days where my willpower starts going. Because if I've eaten super clean for those first 3 days, I start getting the six-pack, I start feeling great, and day 4, 5, and 6, I talk myself out of it. I say, I don't care. Like, I don't care, and I just blind. I don't even think. No, I'm not. No, I'm not thinking that. And I shove the food in my mouth, and then 15 minutes later, I feel horrible. So I'm looking for the biohack that gives me the strength to resist when my defenses are low.
Well, this is a two-part cure. We get right into the brain and turn off the cravings and the negative moods that drive us towards these comfort foods. But we also are very careful to eat enough. So you want definition, but if you go too far in cutting your carbs, cutting your fat, you will have rebound cravings that even the amino acids cannot entirely eliminate. So it's very important that you get rid of the starvation mentality. And you'll find that you don't need to undereat when you're eating in a balanced way all the time, because you're not having to fight the carbs, the high carbs. So I want to make that point, but I also want to tell you a story. One of the really excellent nutritional formulators in the field of bodybuilding is a man named Brian Rand, and his wife is also in the field. And they came to a seminar. I do professional trainings, and they came to one of my seminars, and they waited afterwards, and they came up to me and said, "We are here because we discovered your book, The Diet Cure, about the time that we got a call." We had many calls, but this was a dire call from a bodybuilding coach who had a particular competitor who was very gifted. He had terrific muscle development, but he couldn't get the definition and win because he couldn't stop eating refined carbs, sweets, and starches. So they coached the coach, and the coach put him on the amino acid supplements as guided by the book. It's very easy to decide which ones to go on. There are only 5 to choose from. And the guy started winning.
Wow.
So they were, that was the proof that this was as good as they thought it was going to be. So they continued to do that sort of thing, and they ended up connecting me up with a large company that has many lines for bodybuilders and all kinds of services for bodybuilders. And I went to see them and talked to them about it, and the owner said, after 20 minutes, he said, "Okay, how can we work together?" He said, "This is our one Achilles heel. This is the one thing we can't help our people with. We can give them so much good advice, but we can't stop the cravings. And our only advice has been, suck it up, try harder, and that's not working. And this gives us an explanation. It's not their fault, as you said earlier." And so I'm hoping that they will, from their perspective, also help with, all people like you who are trying to really, in a healthful way, become as well-defined and gorgeous as possible, men and women. Eager to try things, eager to be disciplined, and just this one thing beyond your grasp.
It's funny you brought up the bodybuilding community, Julia, because these guys have been around now 100 years. You look at Sandow, and they kind of are the original biohackers. Their whole life is one
Yes.
big experiment. Their whole
Yes.
is one big experiment. How do I create more muscle and get rid of fat? And 50 years ago, you could have gone to one of these guys and gotten amazing information. You look at guys like, Jack LaLanne and,
Uh-huh.
Paul Bragg and some of the early pioneers, and they were telling us about this, and they really kind of were the people who were creating the beachhead for natural health and holistic living.
And
And
they were all pre-1970. It was the 70s that started on our carb loading, disaster, that has made it impossible for people to follow their example, because prior to 1970, we weren't addicted to carbs. We had perfectly normal bodies. We were all, when I was in high school, nobody was criticized for being too heavy, because hardly anybody was. But really what we were trying to do was have a good personality. Nobody was even talking about bodies, because they were just the way they were. We were all good. I was lucky, and I'm lucky enough to be old enough to remember this. Whereas now, anybody who's trying to do what Jack LaLanne did is up against a whole different world. This is laboratory-designed addictive drug substance. It's not. It shouldn't be categorized as food anymore. That food is actually more addictive
wow.
than chemicals like cocaine, heroin, and alcohol. And why is that? Because many of those chemicals that we can get addicted to target one neurotransmitter in the brain, whereas food targets all of them. And there are 5 functions in the brain that can, if they're out of balance, can create these negative moods and these cravings. And food will interfere with all of them. And at the same time, in the process of the interference, create this incredible addiction. That's really, I've tried to figure out the math, and it's probably somewhere between 10 and 15 times more powerful than drugs of addiction. And that would explain why it's at least 20 times more popular a substance, why it's such a successful business, because the industry has been able to create these absolutely flawlessly addictive substances that never existed before.
One of the passages in your book that I really liked, it says, it's not because you're weak-willed, it's because you're low in certain brain chemicals. You don't have enough of the chemicals that should naturally be making you feel emotionally strong and complete. These brain chemicals are thousands of times stronger than street drugs such as heroin, and your body has to have them. If not, it sends out a command that is stronger than anyone's willpower. This is the message. And the message on the other side of that, which was one of the things that, as we were saying in part 1, really made my ears perk up, is that there are certain combinations of amino acids, and I'm sure probably oils with those amino acids, that can intercept those addictions and restore the brain chemistry so that you don't have those cravings anymore. It's a biohack. It's the definition of a biohack. And this is what I want you to tell us more about, because this is the nugget right here.
That's true. This is the core. And it's ridiculously simple in a way. The brain makes 4 neurotransmitters that make us feel good in 4 different ways. If we're deficient in all of them, we have a tremendous addiction. If we're deeply enough deficient in even one, we have a tremendous addiction. The good news is that addiction can be very short-lived, because we know exactly what single, easily accessible nutrient these 4 parts of the brain require in order to function perfectly, to send out mood signals like, I feel great, I don't need a cookie.
Wow.
I'm getting a lot of pleasure out of working out, seeing my kid. I don't need the extra buzz of chocolate. And it works very, very quickly. At first, we would see people at the end of a week, and we didn't know how long exactly it took for these substances, these nutrients, to kick in and correct the brain chemistry. So eventually, we began giving people these amino acid supplements in the office when they first came in. And within 5 or 10 minutes, we could see, and they would report, hey, I don't want that Snickers bar anymore. Hey, I'm not about to bite your head off, lady. I'm not having to control myself to be polite. And it was universal. I mean, there was hardly ever anybody who walked into our office once we started trialing the amino acids who didn't respond right away. And you can imagine how they feel. The idea is good. They've read my books. They've gone to the website. And then they start working with us and get a little sample and see right then and there that it makes a big difference. So they go right home, of course, and are assiduous in following the directions, and everything goes very smoothly.
We're talking with Julia Ross, the director of the Nutritional Therapy Institute in Mill Valley, California. She has written 2 fantastic books, The Food Cure and The Mood Cure. And
a diet cure and
the diet cure. And yeah, well, it's a cure for diets, right? You
Yes.
don't have to diet anymore. So you know what, I'm gonna do that again because I can tape it.
Okay.
That's the fortunate thing. We're gonna tape this. So let me do that one again. All right, here we go. Let me find my cue here. We are talking with Julia Ross. She is the director of the Nutritional Therapy Institute in Mill Valley, California. She's written 2 fantastic books, The Diet Cure and The Mood Cure. I highly recommend both of them. Why do I recommend them? Because she's finally let us know and shown us why scientifically we do not have to feel poorly anymore when our willpower breaks, because everybody's willpower breaks eventually, because this is scientific. It has to do with chemistry. It has to do with signals, I guess, that come to you in a physical form. Yes, that are way more powerful than even drug addiction signals. And and this is the other thing too, Julia. The food, we have to eat food. This, like drugs, you can at least abstain and say, that's it, I'm done. But you have to eat food, so it's even double worse, because sometimes those hunger pains are real and they're mixing with the sugar cravings. Is that accurate to say?
Oh, yeah, sure. But to be fair, even drugs that are hard to procure are irresistible to people who become addicted to them. They will do anything. They will, betray their own natures, at the drop of a hat, because the compulsion, which originates in the brain, is so powerful. So although food is more addictive and, of course, is much more convenient, which is one of the reasons it's so addictive, is it's everywhere, we have to be realistic about why do so many drug and alcohol addicts relapse. It's at least 90% in any treatment program you can name. I've been working in the field since the late 70s, and I can tell you that it's only gotten worse and worse and worse, and it isn't because people have deteriorated in their moral fiber. It's because their brain chemistry has deteriorated. And so when you talk about improving your self-esteem, alcohol and drug addicts are so desperate for a little bit of self-esteem because they are so apt to relapse and just hate themselves.
I have a good friend who is white knuckling it right now, and he started off probably at about 350, and he's down to about 250 now. He's done 100 pounds white knuckling it. And I asked him, "What's your protocol?" He said, "Calorie restriction," and I don't want to discourage him because he's doing it so far. 100 pounds white knuckling, calorie restriction. But you had another great passage in a book, in one of your books, and I want to read it because this expressly addresses the way he's doing. He's doing a low-cal diet. So low-calorie dieting strips us of muscle and water before it goes after the fat. But muscle is what burns calories. Then you say, oops, dieting starves our brain's appetite-regulating centers. This increases our appetites. Oops, again. Dieting slows down our thyroid's calorie-burning activity. We regain the weight and more. Triple oops, and then I'll add a fourth oops. The self-esteem crashes because you quote unquote you weren't successful. You didn't make it. So I wish him all the best, and I hope he keeps on going. But isn't it eventually, pardon the pun, a diet for failure? I mean, this is he's heading for disaster.
Right, and he's probably experienced it before. That he's probably gained and lost many times, like most people who are stuck with a weight problem. So I'm very hopeful that he'll listen to this interview and get a hold of the Diet Cure and add this to what he's doing, which will allow him to increase his food so that it can be a permanent sustenance, instead of a temporary, desperate measure.
Absolutely. I'm going to make a part 3 to this because there's a lot we need to cover. I want to be sensitive of your time. And here's what I'd love to cover in part 3, which we'll do at your leisure. Let's talk about healthy eating when traveling, improved fat burning potential, and the big one, sugar addiction, and how to break that sugar addiction, turning off dangerous gene expression, rehydration. There's so much I want to get to with you because it is truly amazing to me, Julia, that you were talking about this stuff in the 80s because everybody was upside down on this in the 80s, and you had what now people are acting like is new science now in 2014. You were talking about in the 80s. So, my hat is off to you. And if people want to find out more about you, if they would like to pick up the Diet Cure or pick up the Mood Cure or, get to be a part of any of the programs you're offering or come and see you speak, where can they get in touch with you?
They can go to moodcure.com or dietcure.com or both. They can also find both books, the Mood Cure and the Diet Cure, on Amazon and in the large bookstores like Barnes and Noble. Order it easily. You can certainly order it on the websites. And for those people who would like to have personal coaching to eliminate their cravings and overeating problems, on May 27th, our Craving Coaching Clinic, the virtual clinic, is going to go online. So people will be able to have an easily accessible expert who's worked in my clinics for years, coach them through any aspect of this that they want help with. Of course, they're going to have to read the books too, so that's the best place to start.
Dietcure.com, moodcure.com. Someone who's been ahead of the curve, well ahead of the curve for so many years, really caught my attention. You are someone to follow. You're a thought leader in the space. Julia Ross, I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for being with us today.
It was a pleasure.
I'm Jay Adams. Thank you for joining us in our quest to go right at life, clear-headed and shredded, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
For our full schedule of fights on the NBC Sports Network, CW and ABC affiliates, visit UnitedFightAlliance.com. United Fight Alliance. United we fight.